So the new album, sound wise, concept wise, it's a slight shift. Would you say? Would you fair to say it's more of like an inner journey? So it's you come out from behind your disguise.
Yeah, I think so. I think I've gone sort of darker and deeper, really, and it was just sort of what happened. Really, took a long time to make, like just under 5 years, and then in that time, quite a lot happened in the world, and it just kind of was just sitting there really in the back of my mind. And the last conversation you and I had was about ghosts, and that's basically what I've been thinking about for 5 years, and trying to find out why I was so scared of them and what they are and what they mean. And so the process of that, plus everything going on in the world and all the changes, I had another kid, and then we had, lots of stuff happening in the world. And then I just kind of, those things kind of just sort of sat together, and then the music came out really quickly. And I was quite taken aback by how dark and emotional it was. I think in a way I was trying to make something maybe just a little bit more stark and a little bit more closer to unflesh. My record that I made in 2014, or that I released in 2014, kind of wanted to go back to bare bones and just sort of get, you know, the kind of essence of a feeling. And then that feeling ended up being bigger than I'd sort of expected. So yeah, it's definitely darker, and I think it's more raw than maybe other albums that might have been kind of trying to think about stuff that was a bit more externalized. And this is definitely like, yeah, just like a real sort of trepanning type situation where it's just started to flow.
I mean, did you use the idea of using ghosts? I mean, obviously got an interest in ghosts. We talked about it before, but was that like a way of sparking all the other ideas, or was it actually about ghosts, or all ghosts a metaphor for like emotions or other things as well?
Yeah, all of it really. I think when I'm interested in something, I suppose I have a bit of a kind of I just get really obsessed on one thing, and then I just kind of live in that world for, until I'm kind of done with it. And for me it was ghosts, and ghosts have always been in my, they've always been a topic of interest and kind of a source of entertainment and an escape. And it's also been part of my childhood and then my family. And it's been like that place I've always gone to where I've just wanted to kind of just shut down the ordinary everyday world and just sort of go into somewhere that feels a little bit more uncertain and unanswered, full of unanswered questions. And then, it just kind of amplified that kind of niggling kind of fear of them actually when I had kids. And then I started having these recurring dreams, and um, I realized that it was definitely something psychological. I'm not just, afraid of paranormal. It's not just that simple. It's afraid of things that can overwhelm you, that are invisible, that have a malign intent, and that have a power over you that you can't necessarily explain or control. And for me, that I just wanted to work out what that was. And eventually, it kind of made sense to me that it was a whole mixture of things, and it was deeply psychological. And that kind of that unstoppable force, which is how I was described that dream, and then made a song about it. It's like, it's this thing that takes over you and you can't stop it. And I ended up just kind of making that parallel with depression. And it's just, I found loads of parallels with just the idea of ghosts and all of the elements of ghosts, the way they haunt, the way they go around in loops, the way they relive or play out like something that isn't nice, over and over again. And that's kind of the same as how we live with like PTSD and things like that. They just sit in us and they play out until we try and interrupt them in some way, set them free. So it was quite took me quite a while to figure that out, but I'd always been interested in the idea that like things like poltergeists are like an externalized version of ourselves, or the energy that we've, sort of bad energy that we've kind of ended up manifesting somewhere or between relationships or whatever. So yeah, I'm interested in the whole kind of thing, like face value ghosts, really interested in that, but also, yeah, just like what they could mean as part of the human world. I think it's it's important to sort of maybe say that I'm not kind of, I don't have a set belief about it, but I feel like there is something in that, and it's just part of humans. There's something in humans that generates that, and that creates that. So yeah, but what it is, I don't know. That's why it's so interesting. You can't answer that question. We may never answer it.
Yeah, I was reading the other day, somebody was saying that we are many ghosts inside a fleshy machine, which I really like the idea of.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I like the idea that you're saying there, that the interest in the ghosts is a reflection, as a mental way of dealing with depression, etc. And is music like a continuation of that as well? Is that a way of dealing with both those things, or just a continuation of that kind of mindset?
It depends on who you are and how you make music, I suppose. I don't think any of us can get away from, any of us as in musicians and artists. I don't think we can get away from sort of being a conduit for what's going on internally, and then everything else that radiates into us, and everything that we take on in our lives and from the world around us. I think it's kind of unquestionable. You just you do things, you manifest stuff because you have to. It's passing through you. And most of us are depressed, most of us are anxious, especially in these times. And then music just is one way for that to come out in some sort of tangible, kind of useful way. It always has been for me. And it's sort of, it's like a physical way. It's a physical act of separating yourself from that feeling. You have to get that feeling out. It's trapped otherwise. So yeah, I think so. If that does answer your question, if that was the right.
It kind of does. It's interesting about the purpose of music, isn't it? Because it's a way of dealing with those feelings, but also kind of creates those feelings, doesn't it? Because the album does create a great sense of unease, which is actually weirdly very attractive to listen to.
Well, that's good to hear. Yeah, I suppose it's one thing, dishing it out, but kind of being served it is something else. And it's funny because I don't really listen. I try not to when I'm writing, but to listen to too much. But I don't listen to a lot of dark music. I actually need nice, sort of quite gentle, soft music to sort of help me exist in a slightly less sort of imbalanced way. And so, but it's just funny, isn't it? Because like what comes out is it couldn't be more kind of the antithesis of how I'm sort of what I'm putting in sometimes. But I think Black Dog has a bit of a balance, between that. There is some light in there, and that is really important. And I admire artists who do suffer, with crippling depression, anxiety, but they can make this euphoric, joyous music, and that's their way of kind of giving themselves that endorphin hit and giving others that too. I think that's always amazing. It's just, it's how we channel stuff, how we process stuff. Offers different things to different people, I guess.
I mean, when you finish the record, you made the record, you write the tunes and the tracks. Does it actually make you feel better? Once you've offloaded this stuff, or do you tend to, when you're creating, kind of wallow in this kind of dark, like netherworld that you have to escape from once the studio door is shut?
Weirdly, this record, I think maybe because it was stuff that I wrote it in a period I was really struggling. And I was making most of the songs in a quite a bad state, I would say, and very, very emotional, like quite uncontrollably, like crying a lot of the time. And that's, I see that as a good thing because it's another way of purging. But I think when I finished the record, unlike when I'd finished sort of the previous two records, I was quite scared of it, and I sort of just I felt like this thing had just sort of flopped out, and I just wanted to kind of put it in a cupboard and ignore it for a bit. I didn't really want to go back to it for quite a long time, and it was like I was quite scared of how I was going to perform it and how it would feel and how I'd be able to manage going back to that place. So yeah, I was really nervous about it actually, and I wasn't sure if I'd done the right thing. So it's I've never sort of experienced that before actually with something that I've made.
I mean, when you went back to it and listened to it, did it take you back to that place, or did it feel like a separate thing? Could you separate yourself away from that kind of space where you were before?
Yeah, I think that only has happened in the sort of the last month where I've been doing it live. I've done 3 live shows. Um, and that just I just forgotten how when you've made this music that's so personal and then you've kind of been making it in a really sort of private play set space, and not many people have been there present for the creation of it or even heard it, and then suddenly you bring it into a room full of people, you and you just I'd forgotten that there's this huge kind of chemical reaction or alchemical thing that happens when your music's out there, and then you're getting this kind of exchange happening, and that feeds into the performance, and it's just I don't know why I'd forgotten. I suppose it's been a while since I've been doing shows, but it just really amplified stuff, and it was an amazing feeling actually, and I managed to kind of the adrenaline kept me kind of focused and not getting too caught up in the feelings. I was just able to like get really into that mood. So it'll get really into the kind of the sort of various elements of the album, which there's quite a lot going on, but vocally it's quite a lot for me to do. But I just got really into it, and yeah, as soon as that happened, I felt really happy. I felt really like I'd I'd overcome that fear, and now it was definitely sort of changed into something else that's I don't know what that process is. I don't know. It's strange, isn't it? I suppose maybe it's a bit like having a child, and you kind of you worry about them in their sort of early years when they're a baby and stuff, and then when they start kind of having some independence, you start to sort of relax a bit, and yeah, you just see them sort of come into their own. Maybe it's like that. I don't know.
Yeah, so in a way, the songs do grow up. Do they change? You can create a very introverted, very dark, very personal piece in a studio on your own, but when you perform in front of an audience, it becomes something else. Or it could become darker. I don't know, or it could become several different things all at the same time.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's that's the beauty of it, I suppose. And you don't know how it's gonna reach people. And some of the shows, so the first show I did was a standing show, which was in London, and it was a really incredible atmosphere. There was pure electricity in the air. I really felt the audience and their kind of eagerness, and that was just so brilliant. I didn't expect it actually. It was quite overwhelming. I was really, really amazed by the support. And then the other 2 shows we did were equally really brilliant audiences, but they were seated, so it was a totally different thing. And for this sort of last 2 shows, I felt more like I was an actor doing a play. And because I do have a stage setup that's quite staged and stuff, I have like an armchair and a lamp, and it is kind of a little bit in between those 2 things. But this experience was so different, and but it was just brilliant. Like I love the fact that you can do a performance that totally changes because of an audience and the place and the building that you're in. Buildings have their own personality and atmosphere, and it's quite interesting what happens when you put something quite intense into that place. We've had a few things in the shows that have some of the people that are touring with me. There's Ben Ives who does sounds, and Dan Conway who's doing the visuals, and we've said it's kind of got this kind of strange power of its own, because we've had loads of uncanny things happen in each show, and it's just kind of funny. You just kind of ride with that, and it's quite exciting that not knowing what's going to happen in each performance.
So in a sense, the music's like a poltergeist as well.
Yeah, banging on the walls, interrupting, tripping people up, the audience. Yeah, it's just I don't know. Like I believe anything's possible, and people go into trances when they listen to music sometimes or perform music. I think there's something that's going on with that, and it's tapping into something pretty primal. I think, like dance music, techno. I feel like that's a sort of that is a channel into another state, another state of consciousness, and it's incredible what that does. I don't think I really. I don't know. I don't think I really understand quite how powerful that is sometimes.
It's probably best not to understand, isn't it? It's best to just feel. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, it's one of those things you won't ever be able to explain until you're in it. Yeah, totally.
I mean, the album's also more, I thought, more minimalistic. Was that a conscious choice? You know, there seems to be, I mean, all the albums are great in different ways, but there seems to be uh, sort of almost less, you know, like sparser.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I think I was thinking kind of bare bones. I prefer to just take things away most of the time than add stuff. I think minimal maximal is kind of my sort of my favorite sort of swing. So some stuff I throw loads at, like the track Unstoppable Force. I just there's about 60 tracks in that one arrangement, and it's just loads of strings, and it's really really intense, but I wanted that to feel overwhelming. And then other stuff like A Door Opens, which is just a very simple piano sample, that's just playing very straightforward chords. I just wanted that to feel like quite, yeah, quite raw, and quite just what's the word, not messed around with too much. I quite like leaving mistakes in my work as well. Like if stuff isn't properly quantized, or, I'm not fussy. I'm not fussy about things sounding really, really perfect. But I do think when there's space to hear everything, there's space to just absorb. Maybe the words perhaps maybe took more precedence in this album, and the meanings. But yeah, I just wanted it to feel like you could tap into it quite quickly, really. I think it also helps to create a mood and an atmosphere without sort of clouding it too much.
And you employ quite a few different ways of singing as well. So was the style of singing dictated by the mood of the music, or was often the singing done first, you know, and the music had to fit the style of the singing?
It's a bit of both usually. Sometimes I mean, most of the time actually, the vocal takes are the first or second vocal take, um, but without lyrics being written. So sometimes I write the lyrics as I'm sort of improvising the vocal take. So I have to sort of go back and then change stuff. But usually it's like a first take, and where I've hit the kind of style of singing and the melody and the lyrics, and then I'll go and actually work it all out again and do it again. But um, yeah, I just those voices just came out. The bigger, sort of more masculine maybe voices. I sort of touched on those a little bit when I made Pastoral in 2018, when I released that. And I don't even know where that came from. I think it was like this sort of eternal God voice that I was trying to evoke. And then it just kind of came back with this album. I was kind of, I was really like, I started out thinking I would be like a medium. And if I was a medium, what voices would come out of me. And so I didn't want to preempt too much. I just kind of left it until I had the tracks, the bare bones of tracks, and then the vocals just followed. And yeah, they haven't really sort of changed since those first few takes. So it's partly why a lot of it's so hard to sing, because it's like I didn't sort of plan it, So some of them are spoken, which is easy enough, but the most of them are quite, the range is quite high and low, and takes quite a lot of physical effort to sort of get those out, and the voices and the volume. But it's probably the most satisfying part of it, I think, for me, is the singing on this album, because it's where before I might have like focused more on like beats and having kind of quick fire bangers. This one's more like big songs, big emotions.
It's interesting you speak about your voice being like a medium. So, I mean, obviously it's you that's singing, and obviously it's you tapping into a deep place. But sometimes when you're singing, you are you actually thinking, "Wow, who is that?"
Yeah. I spent a lot of time looking over my shoulder when I was recording. There's, I was really interested in the Enfield poltergeist story, and I'm sure that you probably know about it and some of the details of it. And I was just fascinated by the idea that you know, the supposed sort of spirit that was causing havoc, or one of the spirits that was causing havoc in the household, was supposedly using the sort of larynx of the young girl to speak. And I just found that I kind of had that in my mind all the way through recording this album. I didn't end up doing the voice of is it Bill, but whatever they called him. But I just kind of remember thinking, God, the idea that, you know, something can vibrate your body and speak through you like a sort of puppet really, really sort of intrigued me. And I suppose I wanted to sort of do the same, but it wasn't something external controlling me. It was something internal that I hadn't met before, maybe, and I didn't know about. So yeah, I still don't know really. Still quite fresh, really. It's, you know, it's still don't really know a lot about what the songs are and who they are.
Oh, so the record, the album, is as much as a mystery for you as it is for the listener.
Yeah, I would say so. Some stuff I have written about, and I've said what I think it's about or what I was feeling at the time, and you know what came out. But I still think it's a lot of it is up in the air. A lot of it is, you know, I think it's about a mood, and like you said, it's like it's kind of it can affect you. And it's not necessarily the words, it's not necessarily the voice, it's kind of a combination of all of that. And yeah, it's got its own chemical mix that I suppose, like you said, I don't really necessarily want to know everything about it. It's kind of nice to just let it go out and be what it is, and be different things for different people.
So a lot of the time you're working very instinctively, just, you know, whatever feels right. You just go with the first thing that connects in a sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I let things build up really. I don't make music. Like I said, it's taken 5 years. I haven't made music in that 5 years. Most of the music came out in sort of the last month of me making it. The 5 years of input was just thoughts and pictures and listening to stories, and it just, yeah, just kind of thinking about stuff, and putting things together that I hadn't necessarily put together before in terms of sort of concepts. And yeah, so, and I also spent the summer, before I've recorded all the songs, I spent the summer kind of just noodling around on the Moog Lab, which I was able to have access to over the summer, and just kind of making weird sounds through that and then just sampling it all and bringing it back, and then letting it sit for a while and then going back to it and using that as my sample base. And that was it's quite a different way of doing things for me. I wouldn't normally do it that way, but it was great because it was like kind of rediscovering stuff, and then sort of finding this kind of library of sounds that I just had no idea how I made them, but I just used them, you know. And there's just, I've taken that kind of theme through all of the productions. Like sampling is like the main thing, but there's also sort of ghosted versions of those samples, so like really processed through various different means, and then kind of maybe sampling a whole demo and then using that as just one instrument, stuff like that. I was just trying to take the kind of essence of that idea of being haunted as far as I could push it, really.
So it's the actual sound and the textures of sound are generally the starting points, and they create the moods. Is that how you generally kind of work?
Sort of, yeah. I'm a really unreliable source because I sometimes don't really know. I don't always remember how I've done things. You know, I just go into a zone, and then I suppose it's kind of like being in a trance. You just go into a zone for a couple of hours and you've made these sounds, and then you don't really know what you've done. And then until you listen back, you don't really know if there's anything good. Or so yeah, I'm kind of an unreliable source because I don't have a method that I stick to. I probably do certain things the same way all the time, but I'm just not really conscious of it. I think that's just the way I've just learned how to do music. It's just purely instinctive, and you know, taking immediate things around me, just yeah, going into a zone, really, just seeing what comes out, not being too prescriptive. I think that's important as well.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if I want to put you know, a particular sound in there, it's not necessarily premeditated. It's just a good idea at the time. I can't think of anything, an example of that in this album specifically. there was stuff I definitely wanted to include. Like I had this cassette um, of recording my dad made of my sisters in my childhood home, which features heavily on the album, it's on the artwork. Um, and I knew I wanted to use that because it was like the acoustic of the room, you know, of one of the houses where the piano was in, and it was just a really strong memory for me, that being in that place. So I knew I wanted to have something that had that acoustic that I could use, and so I did. I sampled my sisters playing on the piano and used that as a piano sound. So I had, you know, the piano of my childhood as an instrument, which is such an easy, simple thing to do these days, you know. But for me, it was just like, it really blew my mind that I could do that and go back to that room, you know, as a ghost, sort of.
Yeah. I was just thinking now, in a way, the memories of the ghosts.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Totally. Yeah. It's I think I was aware that, you know, a lot of it's to do with the house, you know, and I felt over my life I've been haunted by this house, you know. So if people can haunt buildings, then maybe buildings can haunt people, and certainly, you know, our childhood memories haunt us, and you know, they shape us, they shape everything, they shape the way they shape our interests and the way we feel about, you know, ourselves and our how we've grown up and everything. So it's, yeah, these are kind of big things really, um, to deal with, but yeah.
I mean, and the most powerful trigger to these memories for you, would it be sound? I mean, some people say that smell's actually the most powerful trigger for memories, but maybe for other people it isn't. You know, maybe some people it's visual, but for you as a musician, would it be sound and melody and bits of music and or a tone of a piano played in a room?
Yeah, I think the piano, when my dad first sent me that sample of my sisters, it kind of, and I hadn't heard it for a really, really long time. And he used to make lots of recordings of us, which was quite unusual at the time, you know, sort of 70s, 80s. It, you know, not everybody had that tech to do that. And it was quite special that he had that stuff to do and that he kept it as well. And so yeah, it was really quite chilling actually, just like hear that very wobbly piano recording and the sort of melodies that they were playing, which is just, you know, children's nursery rhyme melodies. And there was just something very, very sinister in a way about that, because my memories of the house were mostly of being scared of something and being unsettled. So yeah, I think sound for sure is such a, it can be so powerful. But I think even just photographs. I was just looking at photographs, and you know, you remember in a completely different way to how a photograph would capture a room or an atmosphere. And I think just I looked through a lot of old photos of the house and of my family, and that kind of chipped away at some of those memories as well, and it kind of exposed a few things. But a lot of it's dreams, the dreams and the atmosphere of that house that I remember, that's probably amplified in my mind over time. That was the mood I was trying to really get to, was that kind of waking up in the middle of the night, feeling terrified, feeling kind of frozen, not feeling safe or feeling watched, and just kind of needing to, yeah, just to kind of articulate that somehow. Just really wanted to try and get to that feeling.
I mean, did making the record help resolve those feelings? And also, did you look into the house to see if there was any spectral?
I'm still in the process. I did. I early on, when I knew I was going to sort of focus it around the house. Well, I say early on, sort of like at the end of last year, when I kind of thought, oh yeah, I could, you know, this could be the focus here. I wrote. I didn't know. I wasn't sure who was living there, so I just sort of wrote a letter to the address, and just, I didn't say anything about ghosts, but I just said, you know, I used to live here. I'm a musician. I'd love to come and visit the house, and maybe if you'd let me just take some field recordings. But I had no reply. So I just sort of didn't pursue it anymore. I didn't want it. I didn't really know how to sort of go about doing that. So I just didn't. But I have kind of had this desire to look into the history and stuff. So I think I might do that at some point. But no, in terms of resolution, yeah, maybe. I mean, it's like caught up with it's a very, it's very personal to me, my experience of that house. And I since making the album, I've shared, I've shared it with siblings and my parents, and we've all been sharing our stories and recounting some of our stories of, the weirder stuff in that building. And it's kind of made me just more curious, actually, about the original reason I sort of wanted to make an album about ghosts, is just sort of working out what was going on in that place and what happened. But yeah, in a way, it's kind of become quite fun. Just sort of nicer memories of that place, in a way, just sort of seeing how different those memories can be between siblings as well. I think being the youngest, I probably picked up on a lot of anxiety that was happening around the time we had to move, because we had to move suddenly. And it was nice in a way to sort of understand that better and just say, oh, okay, that might have been why I was feeling so on edge, and why the house haunts me, because I kind of didn't necessarily want to leave, and we had to leave quickly, and in a hurry, and we moved to a totally different county. We moved up to Yorkshire. So yeah, so I sort of, those things, it's a bit like a therapy session. It's like, oh, I sort of can understand that now, sort of break the myth a little bit, but also hearing the stories that, the experiences that they shared, and just thinking, well, yeah, there was something then, there was something happening.
I mean, when you moved to the next house, did you have the same kind of, did it have the same kind of emotional resonance, or is it just all that kind of left with the first house?
All left behind for me. I mean, the memories were there, but I mean, we moved from, like a Victorian farmhouse that was kind of isolated in Kent countryside, to a sort of 1980s new build cul-de-sac in Harrogate. And so it couldn't have been more different, really. There was nothing in that, according to me, there was nothing in that house that kind of came with us, although my brother disagrees. He thinks it did. But yeah, that's another story. Maybe that's another album. Hey, the cul-de-sac ghost. But yeah, no, I think we left it behind, and life just carried on. But it always stuck with me. The memories of that place always stuck with me. It was always kind of this what if we'd stayed type of scenario, because I don't think my mum and dad really wanted to leave it either. So there was always that sort of element of sadness that we'd lost something really great.
So in a way, would you say your childhood was the ghost? A loss of childhood innocence. That move was the boundary between, I don't know what age you were when you moved, but like a sort of almost like a mythical haunting past into like the sort of stark reality being teenage or whatever.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of it that way, but I think such a big change. I was sort of 5 or 6 years old, and I suppose at that age it's really formative, and school impacts you massively. I wasn't necessarily a happy kid, even in that first house. I remember being super anxious all the time. So I hated school. I felt very uneasy, unsafe all of the time. So I don't know. I mean, I think moving and then having to adjust was equally difficult. Becoming a teenager, all of it's been hard when I think about it. I don't know if I was that kind of healthy as a child either. So yeah, I don't know. I think these are big things when you're little, and you probably just make sense of them by escaping. And I think what definitely happened when we moved was that I became the sort of kid who just lost themselves in sort of play and costumes, wearing costumes, trying different personas and art and music. And my mum and dad really creative people, so I was allowed to do that quite freely. And I think that's probably just how I coped with it, and how I still cope with it.
Yeah, just thinking nothing's really changed there.
I'm still 5 years old. Yeah, I mean, yeah. Sorry, guys. This is all just my therapy, and yeah. Turned into a career in some bizarre turn of events. Yeah, revealed.
With that world, and that creative world, do you totally inhabit it when you're making the record, or do when you go out the door, when you go out those kind of wooden doors I can see there, which probably isn't the door at all,
Oh,
but
yeah.
the windows, so don't jump out the window. But when you go out the studio, do you just go back? It's complete life, normal life, normal domestic life, with your kids and your family, or is it always just layers?
Um, there's definitely I have to flick a switch for sure. Yeah, and then when I'm in a period of making music and I'm doing the school run either side of making really intensive music, it's quite weird. I'm probably not the easiest person to live with around that time. I'm quite yeah. It's not always possible to just like turn off the flow. But at the same time, it's quite nice to know that there's a sort of a route out of it, and I can just go and play and watch kids TV for a bit and just not really be wallowing too much in that. When I first had children, I'd made Pastoral was my first album that I made after becoming a parent, and I was like, whoa. When I first heard it, I just thought, well, I certainly haven't, calmed down as a person. This is like gone the opposite way to what I expected that would happen. And I think it was the result of just needing to sort of really, really sharply focus my energy into very short periods of time. And that's kind of like an adrenaline rush type situation where you're like, okay, I've got an hour to try and make a song or start making a song. So that's kind of how I had to approach it, and sort of how I've had to approach things ever since. So maybe that answers the question. I don't know.
Yes, I mean it's always there, but you can sort of switch it on or switch it off, or you could just enter that room basically, like musically, physically, mentally.
Yeah, and I think it's sort of it's the things that I've gathered that help me get into that. So, and most of that is not music. Most of that is, like I said, films, pictures, stories, notes. I make a lot of notes as I'm just going about my daily life. If I have a thought, I listen to a lot of podcasts when I have time. And yeah, I think just sort of it's kind of good to just go back to that and then have a look at that list or look at those pictures and just kind of let rip, I guess.
So, in a sense, for somebody like, say, like me as a listener, that the music's actually the tip of the iceberg for you, isn't it? There's always creativity going on, and obviously, when you play live, you do you do your photo sessions, you do all the dressing up part as well, which is an art form, of course, and as well. But the music's made the tip of this very big iceberg of creativity that's helping you kind of deal with these ideas and emotions that are sort of swimming around inside you, and all these memories really of your youth and of life.
Yeah, yeah. I think someone said to me recently that she thinks that I make albums like they're films, and I think that was spot on. Really, I think the music comes last, as it sometimes does in a production, and it's even though the music holds everything, it holds all the mood, all of the emotion, and all of the meaning, maybe some of the narrative too. That's always the last thing for me to come out, and it's funny because it's like everything else is like the storyboard, and it's just it kind of is very film like. I think that is how I approach stuff for sure. So it makes sense. It has to have a sort of vague shape of a story for it to feel like I can get started on the music and know what I'm singing about. I'm gonna,
Yeah, like a soundtrack for a film that's yet to be made.
yeah, yeah, or has been made but is never seen. Do you know what I mean? Like, yeah, it's like this. It's like I suppose you have silent films. This is like the soundtrack to the film without the film kind of thing.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. So, well, brilliant. Well, thanks for that, Elizabeth.